Welcome to your introduction to 4th grade, Unit 2, Empires in the Middle Ages in CKLA. We know that this is likely your first time teaching this unit, so this learning module is designed to help you become more familiar with key content in the Empires in the Middle Ages unit. Our goal is to ensure that you are well prepared to plan and ultimately teach your students. By the end of this module, you will be able to describe why the unit is important and how it connects to diversity, equity, and inclusion, recognize how the unit fits into the overall sequence of learning for students, and determine what students will need to know and be able to do by the end of the unit. At the conclusion of this learning module, we will also give you a chance to reflect on how what you have learned about this unit will influence your planning moving forward. During this module, you will want to have the participant notebook available so that you can record your thoughts and responses. You can find your participant notebook in the same place you access this recording via Schoology. We recommend that you print this document so that you can jot down notes during this learning module. You will also want to be able to reference your teacher guides for Unit 2. This unit is unique as it has 2 parts, so you will want to reference resources for both Parts 1 and 2. Know that the images in this recording are meant to be supportive of your experience, but you can always reference your print materials if that is easier or more helpful for you. To that end, we'll call out specific page numbers throughout this module. Feel free to pause the module now to make sure you have your materials. Let's begin by grounding ourselves in the importance of what students will learn in this unit. The unit is best understood in halves. The first half of the Empires in the Middle Ages unit, Part 1, covers the history of the Middle Ages in Europe, and the second half, Part 2, covers Islamic medieval empires. The Middle Ages in Europe and Islamic medieval empires units have always been companions in the Grade 4 sequence because their subjects are highly related. While the Middle Ages deals with the events of Western Europe and the relationship between the Christian Church and the rulers of the region, the concurrent Islamic empires in the Middle Ages unit looks at events in what is now called the Middle East. Separated by the mid-unit assessment, the 2 topics of study are tied by a common past, the decline of the Roman Empire, and intersecting events such as the Crusades and the movement of knowledge, philosophy, and science from Greek into Arabic into Latin. They are also tied by their impact on the present. It is difficult to understand the modern world without knowing about these 2 regions and their medieval history. By immersing themselves in this unit, students will not only increase their vocabulary and build comprehension skills, but also gain a better understanding of the modern world. As we mentioned earlier, the first half of the Empires in the Middle Ages unit covers the history of the Middle Ages in Europe. Students study the lives of different classes of people throughout the Middle Ages, from serfs to kings, and how classes both helped and hindered one another through the feudal system. They also consider the lives of women, who were not given the same privileges as men in the Middle Ages, but who were expected, no matter their class, to take care of the home. They learn about the word influential, discover figures like Charlemagne, King Henry II, and Joan of Arc, and consider the figures' backgrounds, wealthy versus poor, and how their actions were possible because of those backgrounds. Through reading, writing, and discussion, students consider outcomes of the Middle Ages and how that time in history contrasts with their own lives today. Throughout this unit, a question you may continue to ask students to reflect upon is, how did a person's life in the Middle Ages depend on who they were and where they were born? As you may recall, the second half of the Empires in the Middle Ages unit covers the history of the Islamic medieval empires. In addition, students learn about historical fiction and fables and consider what morals they can learn from such stories. Students also study major historical figures like Muhammad and the impact those figures had on the Islamic empire throughout centuries. They consider why the Islamic Civil War would have been traumatic for Muslims, as well as the treatment of Muslims by Christians during the Crusades. As students learn about these moments in history, they must consider its impact on the present. Again, it's difficult to understand the modern world without knowing about this region and its medieval history. Throughout this unit, a question you may continue to ask students to reflect upon is, what factors made the 5 pillars of Islam so influential when they were first introduced? To explore more about how the Empires in the Middle Ages unit brings diversity, equity, and inclusion to life for students, check out our DEI and social justice guides. These can be found on the daily instruction page under planning documents. Directions for accessing these guides can also be found in your participant notebook. Now it's your turn. In your own words, describe why this unit is important and how it connects to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Feel free to record your thoughts in your participant notebook or discuss with your colleagues if you are with others. Pause this recording now to do so. Now let's dive into some specifics within this unit. This introduction includes the necessary background information to teach the Empires in the Middle Ages unit. This unit, parts 1 and 2, contain 25 daily lessons, plus 4 pausing point days that may be used for differentiated instruction. Each lesson will require a total of 90 minutes. Lessons 15 and 25 are devoted to unit assessments. As noted, 4 days are intended to be used as pausing point days. You may choose to use the first 2 in conjunction with the mid-unit assessment in Lesson 15, and the next set of 2 at the end of the unit. We anticipate that this unit should take approximately 29 days. Here, you can see the student reader used throughout the unit. The reader for this unit has 9 chapters and includes complex text that prepares students in grade 4 for the increased vocabulary and syntax demands aligned texts will present in later grades. Students will be introduced to the Middle Ages in Welcome to the Middle Ages. They'll learn more about lords and serfs in To the Manor Born. The chapters in this reader will keep students engaged, especially when reading Gloomy Castles and Jousting Knights, and 1066, The Battle That Changed History. The reader also includes 2 selections that may be used for enrichment. Please use these selections at your discretion, considering students' needs and the time available in your school day. The writing lessons in this unit will review the stages of the writing process and engage students in an extended writing project. In this unit, students will use a graphic organizer to take notes on information presented in the reader, like you see here on activity page 2.6 from Lesson 2. Students will also paraphrase information from a text, as seen here from Lesson 7, assess the information to form an opinion, and draft a persuasive paragraph in Lesson 13. Now it's your turn. Name 2 to 3 key takeaways you want your students to have by the end of this unit. Pause this recording now to jot down your thoughts or discuss with your colleagues. Content within CKLA is ordered so that new units build upon the content and vocabulary in previous units, both within and across grade levels. The result is that students develop vast background knowledge of literature, science, social studies, and the arts. Let's take a look at how the Empires in the Middle Ages unit connects to others within 4th grade and in future grades. The knowledge and vocabulary gained from the Empires in the Middle Ages unit will prepare students to read other complex texts later in grade 4. For example, text in the American Revolution unit and the Treasure Island unit. In grade 5, they will further build upon their knowledge by reading in the Early American Civilizations unit, the Renaissance unit, and the Reformation unit. There are also units in grades K to 3 that help students build the vocabulary and comprehension skills needed to understand the content covered in grade 4. Now it's your turn. Name one connection between the knowledge and vocabulary in this unit and the future learning that your students will engage in. Pause this recording now to jot down your thoughts or discuss with your colleagues. Now let's make some connections to the unit assessment. Since this unit is split into two sections, it contains two assessments. The first assessment is the mid-unit assessment, which occurs in Lesson 15. Let's take a look at the mid-unit assessment first. This assessment contains a spelling assessment, a unit assessment, and an optional fluency assessment. The unit assessment is split into two parts, both to be completed on the same day. The first part is the spelling assessment. Students will use Activity Book page 15.1 to spell the words as you read them aloud. There are explicit directions on how to administer this assessment, including the words and sentences to read aloud, starting on page 341 of your teacher guide. For your convenience, there is also a spelling analysis chart provided for you on page 345 of your teacher guide. The second part of the assessment is to be done independently. Students will read two selections from the activity book, starting on 15.2, and answer questions about each. More information about the assessment, such as explicit administration instructions, an answer key, and unit assessment analysis, are available in the teacher guide, starting on page 343. Students will then answer grammar and morphology questions, like you see here on these activity book pages. These will evaluate the skills they have practiced in this unit. For your convenience, an answer key is provided for you in the teacher guide on page 349. There is an optional fluency assessment included in the mid-unit assessment. We do recommend you administer the fluency assessment, as it will provide valuable information about your students. You will work with students one-on-one as they read a passage aloud to you while you record notes. A fluency scoring sheet, guidelines for scoring, fourth grade fluency norms, and other information are provided for you in the teacher guide, starting on page 350, to help you analyze the results. The second assessment is the unit assessment, which occurs in Lesson 25 of Part 2. Let's take a look at the unit assessment. This assessment contains reading comprehension section, morphology and grammar sections, all to be completed independently. Students will read two selections from the activity book, starting on page 25.1, and answer questions about each. More information about this assessment, such as explicit administration instructions, the answer key, and unit assessment analysis, are available in the teacher guide Part 2, starting on page 197. Students will then answer grammar and morphology questions, like you see here on activity book pages 25.1. These will evaluate the skills they have practiced in the unit. For your convenience, an answer key is provided for you in the Part 2 teacher guide on page 202. Let's move on to formative assessments found throughout the unit. As you may recall from your initial training, the easiest way to identify the formative assessments of the lesson is to refer to the lesson overview. You see the Lesson 18 overview here. The primary focus objectives and formative assessments will be identified on this page. Here you may see exit passes, journal entries, activity book pages, etc. Here you can see activity book page 18.1 that aligns to the reading focus objective of this lesson. Quick checks for understanding to evaluate classroom performance as a whole are also designated in various lessons. These are located within the body of the lesson, as you see here. In Lesson 20, the teacher asks students to identify the protagonist in the story by showing their choice with the number of fingers they hold up. Careful attention to these checks for understanding, collected on a daily basis, will enable you to quickly determine which students may benefit from reteaching and/or more practice with particular skills. Now it's your turn. Name at least one thing your students will need to know or be able to do in order to be successful on the end of unit assessment. Be sure to consider key content, vocabulary, and literacy skills. Pause this recording now to jot down your thoughts or discuss with your colleagues. We hope that this learning module was useful as you prepare to teach Unit 2, Empires in the Middle Ages. Of course, this is only the beginning. We also strongly recommend that you closely read the texts within your unit as a key part of your intellectual preparation. If you would like more guidance on getting to know texts deeply before you teach them, check out the Text Talk protocol in your participant notebook appendix. And if you would like to access our templates for unit or lesson level planning, those are also found as links in the appendix of your participant notebook. Now it's your turn. What will you prioritize as you continue to plan for this upcoming unit of instruction? For the last time, pause this recording now to jot down your thoughts or discuss with your colleagues. Thanks for engaging in this module today. We hope you were able to accomplish these objectives during our time together. We wish you well in your upcoming instruction with students.